America the beautiful, the bountiful, home to millions, provider for billions. Her greatness was made possible by her agriculture. American agriculture, by God's grace, made up of the land, the people, and the spirit of achievement. A diversity of crops beyond imagination, from Maine potatoes to wheat in Washington, citrus in Florida, salad in California, cotton for diapers and blue jeans, soybeans for ink, for hogs, for tofu, peanuts for baseball games and peanut butter, corn for cattle, and cattle for milk, meat, and cheese. American agriculture. This is but a part of your story, a few of your pages of progress. Pages of Progress, a tribute to the American agricultural editor. Boil agriculture's progress down, and you will find ideas. Trace ideas to their roots, and you'll find them growing from information. And for years, this information has come from agricultural publications and the writers and editors who produce them.
But farm magazines can champion causes. They can champion farm safety, and you're seeing that coming back again. They can champion conservation. They can champion the role of the farmer in today's society.
And this reader wrote somewhere, and when and where, I don't remember. But anyway, they said, Progressive Farmer is like a university in the mailbox. And it wasn't just Progressive Farmer. All farm publications are, in effect, universities in a mailbox. And this is particularly true in earlier years, because most people, farm people, could not get the short courses. They didn't have the benefit of vocational agriculture or 4-H training and so on. So their only door and window that was open to them was for technology, for advances, and so on, was through farm publications.
The flickering oil lamp is rapidly fading before the advance of rural electrification. J.L. Sedgwick, Farm Mechanics, 1931.
The McManigal file has a marvelous photograph of a bunch of guys pulling wire up a road, and that was meant to symbolize, and certainly did symbolize, the coming of REA to the farms. But it was an incredible event. And there are some statistics, back in the 20s, something like 5% of the farms, maybe 10% of the farms, had centralized electricity. And by late 1940s, something like 75% had.
At the other end of the wire were changes that farm families of the 1930s could scarcely imagine. Light bulbs to replace kerosene lanterns, electric milkers to pull more milk from more cows, and refrigerators to keep it all cool. At first, rural customers were too few and far between to offset the expense of spanning those country miles. But in 1935, the U.S. Congress subsidized those lines with the creation of the REA, or Rural Electrification Administration.
The most magical moment in every family's life when you had a single bulb hanging down from the ceiling when REA came. To turn that on and you saw corners of the room you never saw before. And so that was a magic moment, is rural electrification.
It used to require 2/3 of our population to produce enough to feed the nation. Now 30% are doing the same. E.M. Harmon, The Dairy Farmer, 1927.
Wow, visiting this old building sure brings alive the stories that my mother and my grandfather used to tell me. Grandpa, in 1921, like many farmers and stockmen, shipped his fat cattle to the St. Joseph, Missouri stockyards by railroad car. They'd arrive and he'd unload and sort the cattle. He'd had a whole carload of steers, and then he would head for the Livestock Exchange building, this old building. And then he would stroll up and down these hallways and visit each cattle buyer. In my grandpa's day, marketing was done word of mouth. It was a given that consumers would buy beef, the housewife would go and get a weekly supply of beef.
As diet goes, so goes animal agriculture. Before World War II, the average American family had eaten noodles or spaghetti 3 or 4 nights a week. But by 1947, most families were eating meat at nearly every meal. Improved feed rations and antibiotics helped farmers keep pace. Changing consumer demand has altered butterfat content, shaken faith in eggs, and even changed the look of cattle and hogs.
In the early days, 20s, 30s, and 40s, and even up in the 50s, cattle were selected primarily by visual appraisal. The day of the show, the big major shows, had the most influence on the cattle industry.
We are now in the arena of the American Royal Livestock Show, where the National Vocational Agriculture Stock Judging Contests are in progress. Would you look at the Angus and Herefords, the pick of the show? But it takes a practiced eye to spot essential differences in such animals, weigh and evaluate the points that count, and to reach a sound decision. It's learning by doing in the truest sense of the word.
But by the 60s and 70s, that changed. Sire evaluation programs began. Cattle selection began to emphasize production and performance records.
As production methods were refined, producers of beef, milk, pork, and poultry turned their attention to issues influencing demand for their products.
Consumers today have so many choices, and they practice their right to choose. They're consumers who have very strong diet health concerns. There are consumers who follow the animal rights movement as well.
When Ray Kroc opened his first McDonald's in Illinois in 1955, no one could imagine selling 1 billion hamburgers. The marketing of meat changed again.
Hey, where's the beef? I don't think there's anybody back there.
But livestock and dairy producers have always been back there, hard at work. Since the 80s, they have taken their sales messages directly to the American consumer.
You know, it was great growing up on our ranch in Oklahoma. And now when I walk into a New York City restaurant and order up a little bitty Kansas City strip, makes me feel right at home. Oh, I've got a taste for some real food.
It looks as if power farming is going to see some wonderful expansion during the coming year. Frank Meckel, Missouri Ruralist, 1922. Even though the movies couldn't talk 75 years ago, they were telling the story of a new kind of farming. It was a message that changed the way crops and livestock were raised. Bigger, faster machines, greater horsepower. The farmer's adoption of mechanized agriculture is the root cause of the gradual increase in farm size. In 1921, one Midwestern farmer might manage to stretch his labor over 160 acres. Today, 1,000-acre operations are common.
One big change is, if you go back to 1921, you would find maybe 26 tractor manufacturers, and today we would only have 5. But you would have tractors today that were maybe 425 horsepower as opposed to 30. Of course, you wouldn't pay $650 for a tractor anymore, and you might have 15 times the horsepower and pay 200 times as much for it. So it's changed a lot.
Farmers like the efficiency big machinery brings them, but fascination with big iron runs deeper.
Well, I think as long as there's been iron, farmers have loved it. And it's not the productivity so much as they're in love with, it's just it becomes a part of their family. It's an emotional thing. You know, all of us remember the first tractor we drove and the first tractor we fell in love with and the first time we were able to plant or disc or whatever the operation would be.
And Nazi sky raiders swoop down to drop destruction on the coast. The guns roar into action. Tracer bullets, like stretching fingers of smoke, grope for a bomber in one of the most startling battle scenes ever filmed.
World War II shook the globe. The call for victory was heard across the farmland of America. Fewer farmers at home meant making every acre count. Agriculture responded. America's industrial output doubled during wartime. In the decades that followed, this increased capacity cranked out the tractors, plows, and fence that changed the face of farming.
Oh, there's a photograph in there of a baler, a field baler, but you have to have 5 guys to run it. And things have changed, as you know. And there are great photographs in there of stationary combines where all the grain had to be brought in. And again, it's covered with people working. And when you look at that compared with the lumbering combines that we have today, it's unbelievable.
That year, his average was 59.5 bushels an acre, and the cost was some cents under 2 bits a bushel. M.N. Beeler, Capper's farmer, 1935.
Since you didn't have hybrid corn, you would pick out the best ears and put them in a box on the front of the wagon, and that was your seed. You'd dry that, and that was your seed for the next year. But hybrid seed, hybrid corn really came in quickly.
In the early 1920s, hybrid corn was sold to American farmers for the first time. By the mid-1940s, nearly all the corn planted in major corn-growing areas was hybrid corn. This new science took some getting used to.
There was a question came up about what if he couldn't get hybrid seed or a short supply, and I asked him, well, can't you just pick out some of your best ears and put them in the box on the front of the wagon? He says, no, it doesn't work that way anymore.
Hybrids coupled with fertilizer to push America's average corn yield higher and higher.
A boy in Prentiss County, Mississippi, chose 1 acre of a 9-acre field that had been in corn continuously for a quarter of a century. His goal was 300. Trying for the right balance between plant population and amount of fertilization, he went from 179 to 187, and then in 1955, the Dixie boy did it. Lamar Ratliff became the first to harvest 304 bushels from a measured acre.
When science boosted yields, farmers boosted research. They sought to focus it on the weeds and bugs that have always plagued agriculture. Chemistry did produce better living for farmers, but science had also presented agriculture with a challenge. Rachel Carson's book Silent Spring planted seeds of doubt about modern chemistry. Since then, society's debate over how farmers should control pests has at times been heated. California farmer editor Len Richardson remembers the fight against the medfly.
Some of those environmentalists told me straight out, we're going to shoot those helicopters right out of the sky. I mean, it was serious stuff. Fortunately, you know, we worked through all of that. We have it pretty well under control. We have emergency plans in place in case, you know, outbreaks occur.
In response to public concern, those in agriculture redoubled their stewardship efforts. New methods and products minimize risk and maximize pest control.
All summer long, I and others would be in the field with a hoe. Now, with the magic of herbicide, you see endless rows as far as you can see, not a stalk of grass, not a weed in sight.
Agriculture is cruising down the information highway with the pedal to the metal. Patrick Arthur, Farm Industry News, 1994. Filmmaker C.L. Vennard took the modernization of farming to its logical conclusion in this early silent movie. Today's technology has put that vision within the farmer's grasp. Computers and satellites now enable growers to track yields as the crop is harvested. Microchips track milk production, feeding, and records. They can apply chemicals and fertilizer just where they're needed and help farmers make better decisions.
I would hope that the producer will be empowered by these new technologies for making decisions rather than becoming entrapped by technologies that trap him into the data. I'd like to see his gray cells running the black boxes on the farm.
High technology is more than a black box on the farm. Genetic engineering is changing both the inputs to production and the products themselves. Research is producing crops that bugs won't eat and food that more people will. Soybeans into ink, corn into fuel, tobacco into medicine. Today's producers shoulder both a global impact and a local responsibility.
We have a melon grower here who can tell you by row when the seeds are planted, who it's going to, and when it will be at the processing packing plant and when it will be delivered. And it's labeled so that if the retailer who comes to depend upon him has a customer comes up and says, this is the lousiest melon or whatever, you know, I've come across, he just picks up the phone and calls them direct, and he can trace it all the way back to that field, to that plant, to that pesticide.
Behind this innovation is a single challenge to those in agriculture that dwarfs all others. It's the prospect of a world population projected to double by the year 2030.
Society is asking the farmer to use wisdom, and we're sitting here needing more data, needing more information, looking for the knowledge. The promise of these technologies, these new information technologies that we have, is that perhaps we can acquire that outside knowledge and information and process that and actually turn that data into decisions that can be applied with wisdom. And that certainly is a challenge for ag communicators to be involved in that process as well.
The world-feeding farmers of tomorrow will require more in-depth knowledge than ever before. To meet the challenge, writers and editors are embracing new technology while holding to the traditions that have always made farm publications special to their readers.
Ultimately, as magazine editors, I think our goal is to not only help our readers survive and thrive in today's times, but to help them survive and thrive in the future as well. We want them to be successful and profitable and sustainable so that we can work with them, whether it's through the pages of the magazine or through the internet or through any number of communication methods for many years to come.
American agriculture. This is but a part of your story. a few of your pages of progress. You are the people who sow the seed, tend the animals, raise the families, and feed the world. American agriculture, America the bountiful, America the beautiful.